I think out of any of the heroes in this game, Slime King is the most useless hero in the game, and I mean it. The situations he's meant to be used in are few and far between, and usually he can be replaced by another tower, and overall is just outclassed. It all adds up to him being subpar pick in a lot of cases. Slime King spawns slimes, obviously, which do nothing, but later levels do deal additional fire damage. He's got a decently fast spawn rate, making him a decent pick for multiple lane maps. He sort of fills the back defense role, especially for early game, which is the most boring role to have and isn't that groundbreaking because it's a summoner. This makes him pretty good for early game leagues, especially with Maitake and Dumpster Child. Instead of having to spend mana placing more dumps in Maitakes, you can instead place Slime King and have it do the job for you and not be a waste, and also be like a lot cheaper. This is actually a pretty respectable usage for Slime King, and there isn't really anything wrong with his Zeus case. Not to mention he works pretty well on Silent Sanctuary with the additional scaling. Biggest problem is that it's his only role, and other possible roles, and to an extent the back defense role, are easily taken by other heroes. Fire damage is still kinda situational at best. If you want constant effect damage to a boss, you're still better off microing Dump. Just level 5 Dump alone does more damage than Inferno ever does, not to mention you can stack it for basically free and the potential for a Spectre boost. The change that made Inferno actually deal damage felt more like a bug fix than an actual change, and I mean it literally was a bug fix, so like, the effect also limits its stacking potential. Kirkid is literally the same price, has crowd control, burst damage, instead of relying on effects, and just has way better stacking potential because of that. The only hole in my argument is that level 1 through 4 Kirkid are kinda mid. With the health buffs and playing on a slightly longer map, it's not that noticeable, and the build-up is worth it. That's literally the only thing Slime King has, and I believe it's stupid. Back on to stacking potential, one single Slime King with max scaling has about 800 health, which deals about 90 DPS, with the effect coming from 40 of it. Kirkid with no scaling does about 60 DPS. 2 Slime Kings would deal about 140 DPS, and 2 Kirkids deal 120. I know DPS isn't the best measurement for this, because it's burst damage and they take ages to spawn, but a 20 DPS difference for infinitely more benefits. I also didn't take into account the 350 HP being affected by scaling, and let's not forget more people bringing Kirkid or a second discount dog ability, making the gap even wider. Slime King also has an ability which must be his saving grace, right? It spawns a 7,000 health Slime King for 20k mana, but there just so happens to be another ability which does just that with bonus, albeit useless, explosion damage. On a tower you pretty much bring every match. Spending 20k mana for 7k damage is a pretty good deal, but the problem is the price increases exponentially, so it just punishes you for using it, and it makes it a noob trap. Having Little Timmy use Slime King ability on wave 25 when you want to save it for the final wave, so now you can't afford it, is pretty stupid. To be fair, Bombflow has these issues as well, and it's very easy to accidentally fat finger the Bombflow ability, but again, it's literally the same ability but better, and you pretty much always have it, so what's the point? Slime King's only genuine use case is his insane synergies with Buzzer. Dark Summoner is an ability that makes every summon on the map explode on death. The explosion damage is actually 50% of the original health. Slime King gets full benefit from this ability. Actually, it's because it's the only summoner to actually get benefited by this ability. There's also the Slime King ability, which is the strongest summon in the game, and it bumps it up to do 10,000 damage, which isn't that bad, but considering it's literally the same health as the original Slime King, that's all I'm gonna say. This ability also stacks, and if you're able to get multiple Slime Kings on the field, you can get a decent deal from the ability. The problem is that it's pretty much Buzzer doing the heavy lifting, and it retroactively justifies Slime King being one of the worst towers. Since I'm gonna die here, there's gonna be one secret I'm gonna share with you. I did not care for Buzzer. She insists on herself. Like I said in the beginning, Slime King isn't all bad. The things he can do are few and far between, and he's entirely replaced by towers you normally bring regardless. He's good for Silent Sanctuary, and maps like Minesweeper and Doors Adventure have over-the-top health scaling, which Slime King can take full advantage of, and in this case, he's actually really good, and it makes up for the consistency and crowd control Kirkid brings. Kirkid's crowd control is a more enticing deal compared to Slime King's burn, which is easily replaceable by Dumpster and even Maitake. Slime King's ability is literally just a reskin of Balloon Palace Pals ability, which is a tower you pretty much always bring, and in fact, Balloon Pals ability was added earlier. I feel like even if you fix these issues, I don't see Slime King being used as much, because it also comes from a lack of a defined role, outside of him being Dumpster Child's babysitter. Slime King shares the same price as other summoners, and they all have these special abilities, while Slime King there's basically nothing special about him. I think a really interesting fix would be the ability to place him on wave 1. 250 mana placement would be interesting, as it would actually kind of justify level 1 being so weak, and having a quote-unquote dedicated early game tower similar to Dump being able to be placed on wave 1 would be interesting. Another one which I think is needed is the ability to be not as expensive, just to spawn a nerfed version of the weakest boss in the game. Make it 10,000 health instead, and remove the price scaling, or at the very least make the scaling not as harsh, or only apply it to the base price instead of it increasing per use. The only abilities that need price scaling are abilities that get exponentially better, like Buzzer ability and Discount Dog ability. Slime King ability is way too expensive for such a weak summon, and it just punishes you for not using it outside of the final wave. As for health, I think level 5 should get a buff, and level 3 could be buffed as well, as the wave 10 scaling penalty for summoners really guts the potential. This is what a general buff to Slime King should be, regardless of what role he's supposed to fill. I didn't want to make specific stats because you could really do anything with him, as he's the most basic a summoner can be, and if you're lazy and want him to fill a specific role, you can just nuke buff like a random stat. I think another thing is that Bombflow and Kirkid don't reward you for using them as crowd control. Kirkid's damage fall off feels way too harsh, and it feels like an afterthought compared to him using him for purely burst damage with crowd control as a side. And Bombflow completely takes Slime King's job, like I said, and it's pretty much impossible to actually utilize the splash damage, and you aren't really punished for not using it anyway. Most times Slime King is useful comes off more as crutches and very niche strategies rather than genuinely being better at that specific thing. I think a simple fix for Kirkid, alongside rebalancing him to be more geared towards crowd control, would be to make the effect based on time left rather than enemies hit. It would reward Kirkid for hitting hyper-clumped enemies, but also punish him for hitting summoners or spaced enemies. And to rework Bombflow into being Military Base's airstrike ability from TDS, 1-to-1. There's also newer maps generally being unfriendly towards summoners, but that's just a general thing more than anything specific to Slime King. And in fact, Slime King is better for multi-lane maps, but that's really pushing it. Who knows, there's probably some super gate-kept strategy that relies on Slime King and Slime King only, and there's no other tower you can use with it. If you manage to find it, I will pin your comment and bless you with my eternal gratitude. Feel free to like and subscribe as it's cool. Goodbye video. That's literally what it said in the script.